welcome back to the CRP, and we are here with another one of our MMA Minutes. I'm Miguel Iturrate. I am joined by our MMA analyst, Devin Miller, to look at the news that's coming down the pike here today on Monday, March 18th. The UFC has released information that they have signed a deal for distribution with ESPN, and the deal goes beyond what they've already done with ESPN. I'm going to let Devin fill you in on the details. He has been listening to Dana White's interviews, but it looks like the UFC has struck a deal that they're very happy with, and, it's the kind of thing that is looking towards the future. Dev, give us the scoop.
Well, Miguel, the UFC has, in my opinion, once again, made another business deal that I feel is ahead of the curve when it comes to the wave of the future. And they restructured their UFC deal that they had already signed. That was a 5-year deal. They've extended that to a 7-year deal. So this will be in effect at this current time until the end of 2025. But the most important detail of the restructuring that they pulled off with this is that they're the only pay-per-view provider that they'll be working with now is ESPN Plus. And ESPN Plus is already that's what's holding the majority of UFC content. Most of their fight nights are on ESPN Plus. I think only about 4 or 5 are on ESPN Network this year, and they were scheduled to have 12 pay-per-views. And now the only streaming service, the only way you can get access to the UFC pay-per-views is through the ESPN Plus app. And I used to buy them on Fight Pass. I won't be able to do that anymore. If you've got Dish Network or DirecTV, you won't be able to do that anymore. So this is pushing people into streaming, which what Dana White said with his interview with Megan O'Leary is pretty accurate. He said, some people are freaking out about the streaming deal, but everything's going to streaming. Netflix has taken over a lot of the television industry. People have Hulu. People watch YouTube. So streaming is definitely the way of the future. And we've seen guys like Canelo Alvarez and Tyson Fury make big deals with The Zone and ESPN Plus, respectively. And I think for a very small price, we got 11 Canelo fights, the biggest star in boxing, for $9.99 a month for the next few years, which it's hard to even believe they have enough money to pay him $365 million without cheap of a subscription cost, but they do. So I think this is going to, now that everything with the UFC is under one roof and they're under the ESPN umbrella, I think this will become will become less costly for the UFC fan, and I believe I think it'll be a great thing moving forward.
Well, that is a lot to take in here. I've also done a little bit of research in this now. Some of these companies that are doing the gobbling up, like Netflix and stuff, where, that they're buying up material and getting content, basically, are going deeply in the hole, because that is the investment that's going on, jockeying for position in the streaming world, because they're also making that play that the UFC is making here, which is to move into the next wave of the future, to leave behind the old ways. The fact is that with the ESPN deal, it ties into pay-per-view, so they're not quite ready to give up, all that revenue all at once, especially, at the end of the day, everyone in the States still has a TV that's hooked up to cable and blah, blah, blah. So, even though maybe a lot of people are starting to get away from that and they're more reliant on their phones and stuff, I still think that model still fits with the TVs and stuff. So, the pay-per-views will still be there, and they get all the hype on ESPN, and then ESPN puts together, the packages and stuff. I wonder if it'll be a situation where they maybe feature other fighters, like on Fox and some of the other outlets that they still have, and will they even be able to appear on ESPN pay-per-views if they haven't appeared on ESPN before? There's a lot of interesting nuggets that come with the deal, but yeah, overall I think it's progress, and it should put them ahead of the curve. Yeah, they'll piss some people off, and maybe even in the immediate future lose some eyes, because but that's what they're doing, is they're going in the hole to ESPN, and in a similar way in philosophy, the UFC, to go ahead and be ready for the future.
Well, one thing for sure, I think we can both agree with this is so far, not only has the UFC been happy with the ESPN deal just in the few months since the beginning of this year, but obviously ESPN's happy as well if they're like, okay, we want it all. And we want to restructure it. We want it for 7 years, and we want it all right here. So obviously this is working out for both of them. And I mean, something that Dana White was talking about in his interview with Megan O'Leary that I encourage people to go check out is he was talking about just the production that comes with being on ESPN. He said, I was on the treadmill the other day and I saw a 4.5-minute piece on Darren Till on ESPN Network. And just the amount of coverage that these fighters get. He was talking about how they've got performance institutes popping up. They're building 3 in Mexico. They're building 1 in China. They're going to put 1 in Puerto Rico. They're putting them all over the world to try to groom and bring in new talent. They're going to use Fight Pass to have smaller shows and basically like the minor leagues leading up to the UFC. And there's so much going on here, but I can speak from a practical, as a fan standpoint, that I have wanted forever. I believe that there's going to be a possibility you're going to have a chance to watch a pay-per-view without buying an ESPN Plus membership. I think you'll be able to go to the app for, like, let's say a Conor McGregor Khabib fight, where as a super casual fan, even they want to watch this. They can still go there, purchase this, but they're not even into sports. They don't have an ESPN Plus app. I still think they'll be able to pay the $65, $70 to buy this. But I think that there's going to be a package deal that has been something that's been right up my alley as a hardcore fan that watches all of these for a long time, where we pay, let's say, $30 a month, 12 months a year, but we have everything. We have everything on this app. I would do that in a heartbeat. It would actually save me money compared to the $5 I'm paying right now, 12 months a year, so $60 right there, and then $65 for a pay-per-view every month. So that would actually be cost-effective for me. And I think they're going to do that to try to bring in not only the hardcore fans, but fans that are going to be like, man, it's really not a bad deal because there's a lot of those UFC fights I want to watch, and I can spare $30 a month or $25 a month and get all their content. So I think this in the long run, like you said, in the short term, they could lose some eyes. In the long run, I think this is gonna be massive. And Dana White said it himself. He said, I believe we're one of the big 4 sports in America now with this deal, which could be a little overstatement, but
well, he's doing some negotiating. So now let's revisit a subject that we've already visited here at the CRP, but. Now go back and look at the Reebok deal, which everybody hates. But a few years back, they went to Reebok and they came to a deal, and they were able to say to Reebok, we're on Spike TV, and we do pay-per-views, and we get this many. We also have a couple of shows on ESPN, a couple of shows on Fox, and we're spread out, and we're all over the place like this. And this is how many eyes we get, and they came to this deal. 3 years down the line, they're about halfway done with that deal, and now in 3 years they get to negotiate, and think how powerful they're going to be walking into them and saying, now we're worldwide with ESPN, their brand, our brand is piggybacked on their brand on a worldwide basis. Now we have this many eyes and this many shows and this many things and stuff, and we had fantasized or talked about the potential for them to say, here's a deal that's 10 times more valuable than the last Reebok deal. Maybe it's Adidas or somebody like that as a competitor, or maybe it's Reebok re-upping, but they come and say 6 years, $1 billion. Then, that puts them firmly as the number 4 sport in kind of ahead of hockey kind of thing in the United States, for sure. And that's the kind of thing I think that they're thinking about working for. So that's why, they'll take a little bit of a black eye. They're not mentioning that, but that's the end state of what this means. This is that penthouse moving on up.
I completely agree, and I also think we need to talk about. I really believe what ESPN has made at the right time with ESPN Plus. This might be a bold statement, but I think it might be the best business move in the history of sports. I truly believe that. And I'll explain why, because we're going to see other sports follow suit. You're going to see something like the NBA, or the NFL that are going to get a contract on ESPN Plus, and you're going to have every single game that's played on a Thursday night, a Wednesday night, or whatever. You're going to be able to tune in on ESPN Plus and find your team and watch it. And the thing is, you spend that money on an ESPN Plus thing, the UFC is going to be getting a ton of eyeballs because there's already people from different sports like college football and college basketball. And I think in the future, NBA or NFL or something, whenever their contracts run out with TNT and all these different, they're going to want to come under one roof the same way the UFC did. The UFC is just way ahead of everybody. And right now, people that are tuning into college football, they're seeing all the different promos on the app and all the different shows and highlight reel stuff that they've got going on, the lead up shows for the UFC. So it's drawing in those eyeballs. And the ESPN Plus is going to end up with millions and millions of subscribers. And it's good. I mean, they're going to be it's going to be so lucrative for them on all these different sports that they're going to start bringing in. And I think that's going to be really good with the UFC. And I almost bet right now with the Zone, you basically just have combat sports. ESPN, I'm sure that like Bellator and all them probably approached ESPN like trying to talk, and they're probably, I mean, if they were wanting to get in the business of MMA and combat sports, you know that they were just like, oh, we're going to wait and talk to the UFC. And they got the UFC in there, and I think that's the reason why you see this new spark and energy in Dana White, where he feels like, oh man, this is really what we've been waiting on. And it's something that couldn't have been forecasted 5 years ago, because even just 5 years ago, streaming was not what it is right now. And Netflix came in, the streaming systems came in, we started seeing Fire TV and Roku's and Apple TV and smart TVs and all this stuff get rolled out, and that just has completely changed the industry. And now it's getting to a point where it's like ESPN is starting to globally consolidate the sports market onto their app, and they can have 50 streams up at the same time for all different sports. And people can click into what they want to watch when they want to watch it on demand. It's just the wave of the future. I think the UFC definitely got ahead of the curve on this. And as you said about stuff like Reebok, that's gonna help them so much in their negotiations moving forward about who is going to be our main sponsor. And that's gonna make them just all have to bid really high to get them even more money to sponsor these fighters. And I think you're spot on with that.
And, on top of that, just to wrap up, it puts the UFC in combat sports. You mentioned, the Zone just has combat sports. ESPN Plus has the access to other sports, but ESPN Plus also does have a major commitment on the boxing side. So they're competing head-to-head with the Zone on just about all fronts there. Their deal is with Top Rank, and they've been pulling in, big names on the boxing end and stuff. So, yeah, I think they tied in with one of the King Kongs there in the early going, and that's what makes the UFC smart. Tying it into the history of combat sports, boxing first, at the turn of the century, the first, films, the first time people were using film cameras, of the first 100 or 200 hours ever filmed, roughly half of it is boxing, because the sponsors like boxing, and because the motion helped them test the cameras and stuff like that. But the earliest films are available. You've got guys like juggling and like a dog running around, and guys like boxing and sparring. Legitimate world champion guys from like Bob Fitzsimmons from the 1890s and stuff like that. So boxing's always been at the cutting edge. Radio. They were the first, people used to stand on street corners getting radio transmissions of boxing matches, what happened on the other coast, what happened with Jack Dempsey's fight, et cetera, et cetera. TV in the 40s, they were, the shows that were weekly shows that, our grandparents talked about, remembering seeing Joe Louis and the like on TV. Again, boxing and combat sports has always been way ahead in the technology end, and here they're just sort of showing that they're still there, they're still ahead of the game, and more flexible than some of the other team sports, I guess. So they've carved a nice spot. Dana White said it makes them one of the top 4 sports in the country, and if that plays out, then we're about to see another level here.
Yeah, and I could be wrong about this. I'm pretty sure that Tyson Fury just signed a contract with ESPN Plus. Is that correct?
Yep,
like $100 million?
Yep. Tyson Fury is one of the big names that ESPN has signed. ESPN Plus, along with, they have a deal that ties them into Top Rank pretty deeply, which means that they've got access to Top Rank's roster right now, which would include the likes of Terrence Crawford, Vasyl Lomachenko, that sort of talent. And, Lomachenko and Crawford are probably the top two fighters pound for pound in the world on the boxing end. So, and that just is the tip of the iceberg with what Top Rank brings, as well as, their libraries and things like that. So, they're deeply involved with that stuff.
Yeah, and I think that we're going to start seeing possibilities of with these streaming services now getting into the realm of pay-per-view buys and stuff. We could see a deal cut between, Fox and ESPN to do a Spence Crawford pay-per-view on the ESPN Plus app, maybe, or we're going to start seeing Fox trying to get into the same business to try to compete with DAZN and ESPN Plus. But nevertheless, it still is the same. These companies, people are realizing that streaming and these apps are where things are going, and it's really going to start pushing out the old way of doing things with cable providers, and especially when it comes to sports, I believe. I think we'll still have network television for things like sitcoms and different types of like movies, like kind of what we got with Netflix, where they're going to buy up content. And we've been seeing this. Netflix and Amazon Prime, they're producing their own original content already. So we're going to start seeing more and more of that go into these streaming services. And I, for one, am excited. I think that it will be cost effective in the long run, and I think that it's going to be really good for combat sports fans to have one central, like I'm saying, a one-stop shop for the sport, and I think that that's a really cool thing.
And let's see how it plays out. Let's see when they announce their first ESPN-based pay-per-view and who the headline act is. Conor McGregor just announced today he'd like to return in July, so we will see if that ties in or if it's too soon to play every single card you've got on there.
Well, real quick, I was just going to let you know that they already announced the next pay-per-view will be on ESPN Plus.
Okay, so do we know which one that is? UFC 237, is it?
236 with Holloway and Poirier as the main event, with Gastelum and Adesanya as the co-main event.
All right, terrific. So yeah, that's coming up next month, and they'll roll from there, and we'll see how the deal develops. But it doesn't look like anything but big news on the business end for the UFC today. I've been joined by our CRP MMA analyst Devin Miller to talk more about the UFC's announced deal with ESPN.